ระหว่างที่อาจารย์แต่ละท่านกำลังเขียนรายงานการเดินทางนะคะก็ขออนุญาตต้อนรับอย่างไม่เป็นทางการก่อนนะคะเข้าสู่การเสวนาถอดบทเรียนการจัดการศึกษาวิทยาศาสตร์คณิตศาสตร์เป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะคะ So I would like to start by welcoming you all to our forum today. Lesson learned on teaching science and mathematics in English for learners in Thailand. We have a slight change of the agenda.The president of IPST, she really wants to be here with you, but she has a press conference on our new TV program, Science Fighting. So she needs to be on television this morning, but she said she would find some time to drop by and say hello. So we will skip the opening remark by the president of IPST, and maybe we should start by introducing ourselves because this is today it's quite a small forum and we are fortunate today to have very remarkable speakers and also very able teachers who had experiences in teaching science and mathematics in English and IPST really do hope that today would be a very fruitful forum and we would get to listen to your suggestion, your experience and your recommendations about how IPST could support the teaching of science and mathematics in English. So if I may start, sorry, wrong computer. If I may start by introducing myself, that was an old photo with an old hair.So my name is Satya Lankapin and I'm from IPST, a new unit called the IPST Special Initiative Division. And our forum today has a very able coordinator, Kun Satya, I think she's somewhere around. Kun Satya, she's an education specialist at IPST.And also there's a whole team of IPST staff in our division, in the division behind this event. So we have Dr. John Style, the consultant to IPST, คุณเจคุณเอคุณน้ำค้างคุณน้ำตาลคุณวรวลันและคุณณัฐการ many of which may have talked to you on the phone prior to this event. So they are actually here to help you out in this forum today. So maybe if I could ask our participants to each of you introduce yourself very briefly, stating where you are from and maybe talk a little bit about your experience in teaching science and math in English. Maybe we start from the outside, the furthest
first.Hi, my name is Thanasak. I used to teach at Assumption Thonburi Internet. It's not international, it's English programs. I'm a math teacher on grade 11 and 12, and my experience in teaching is just 1 year, but I'm now teaching iOS programming at Software Park and True Corporation in the name of Mahidol. Okay. Thank you very
much.Good morning. My name is Wee. I'm actually members of Ideal English Academy, but as of now, I'm stationed at Circuit Hart Convent English program. Used to teach math for grade 10, 11, 12 for 4 years. Right now, teaching computer for grade 11 and 12. So I'm teaching math for 4 years, 4-year experience. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dubadili Virapan. I'm teaching at Sacred Heart Convent School.And I'm teaching at a primary school for 4 years in math and science.
Hi, my name is Mr. Shapika. I teach in Faculty of Science and Technology, Sonosit Rajapat University.
My name is Jakavut Mamangkon. I teach Villaget Upaham School.I teach physics.
Good morning. I am Kitisak Deepun. I teach mathematics in Mathyom Tak Sin Rayom School. Rayong Province.
Good morning. My name is Vattana Kongthon. Come from East Tayasat School. My teaching mathematics, Mathayom 2, Mathayom 1, 2, 5, and 6. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Surasak Siswong. I'm teacher at CMC Maviakan School from Ubon Ratchathani Province. I have experience for teach science subjects and mathematics subjects for 3 years already, and I have never teach science mathematics in English. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Nacha Kamon from Faculty of Education, Chiang Mai University. I'm teaching how to teach math. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Fred Marshall, California State University, Sacramento. I'm an applied linguist specializing in second language acquisition and vocabulary. And for the last 8 years, off and on, I've been teaching at the Institute for International Studies at Ramkhamhaeng University, teaching linguistics.
Good morning. I'm Kornkamon Chuchoi. I teach chemistry and science in Demonstration School of Sosunanta Ratchapat University.
Good morning. I'm Wachirason Sangsuan. I'm from Faculty of Education, Sosunanta Ratchapat University. I used to teach chemistry at Mahidol Vidyanusan School for 4 years. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Mr. Pasongpun Pham from Ayutthaya International School in Ayutthaya, teaching in chemistry, Mathayom 5. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Randy Merker, and I work at the Rumradi International School. For 2.5 years, I've been the math and science coach there. And previous to that, I was teaching science and math in America at middle school and high school. And currently at Rumradi International School, I'm in the elementary school.
Good morning. I was introduced already. I'm John Stiles. I am a consultant for IPST in the Special Initiatives Division and working mostly with the English language programs.
Good morning. My name is Mark. I used to be the special teachers at New South Wales International School in the SAT course in the math and verbal. And I used to be the special teacher in the English program at Assumption College School. Now I am the academic coordinators between Ministry of Education and Oxford University and Oxford University Press, Thailand.
Sakonchai Chanunan from Faculty of Education, Naresuan University. Actually, I work as kind of pre-service teacher, training, things like that. And I work sometimes as got invited by school to teach like science project at Chalerm Kwan Sati and demonstration of Naresuan University School. Not really about teaching science in English, but kind of course preparing, things like that.
Good morning. My name is Thepol Lomalak. I'm a lecturer at Buriram Ratchapat University. Actually, I didn't teach science. I didn't teach science in English language, but I taught in earth science, astronomy and space, and general science program for undergrad students.
Good morning. My name is Nathakit Sawatesong. I'm come from Faculty Education, Ratchapat Ubon Ratchathani University. My project is develop the pre-service teacher in science. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Picha Kamsuwan. I'm from Southeast Asia University at the Department of Mechanical Engineering. And I've been teaching for 7 years in many schools in the English program. Usually I teach mathematics and science.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Saran Pinveha. Mostly I'm a part-time teacher. I'm teaching the science and computer for Matayom 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Narongpan Chunram. I come from Chiang Mai Ratchapat University. I work for the climate change. Therefore, I come here, need to join with everyone because we need to change the content for the climate change. Need to change, maybe a lot of knowledge in school need to change too. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kamon Sanitam. I come from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, Chiang Mai Ratchapat University. I have been taught there for 6 years. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Purik Bantong. I teach chemistry and general science at Kangkro Vitya School, Chayapum Province. 2 years I have experience for teach in English. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Panuma Thamthawan School. I'm teaching in science and biology. I'm from Swang Dandin School, Sakonnakhon Province.
สวัสดีครับ Good morning. My name is Narongrit Wari. I'm a science teacher at Palapa Vitya School, Nakhon Phanom Province, and I have been teaching science in English for 2 years. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anuthida Imdamrong. I'm a mathematics teacher. I teach in English this year and this semester, but I enjoy English and I teach mathematics for more than 10 years. I'm come from Sasakan Siksa School, Kalasin Province, and this means that we teach EIS class. Okay, nice to meet you.
Hello everyone. My name is Phongphaka Ninkao. I come from Sasakan Siksa School, Kalasin Province. I have been experienced 2 years for teach students in English language by English integrated study. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chana Khanit Suramit Maitri. I come from Saraburi Vityakom School. I'm a science teacher in Thai in my school, but I'm a teacher assistant of science foreigner teacher in science for 9 years. I never teach science in English.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sawarot Maimunkao. I'm a research assistant from National Center of Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. Actually, I'm not have any experience on the teaching in university or school, but I have experience on training, the international training, which come to work with us at biotechnology, at biotech. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Anjila Bopasert. I come from Sirinthorn College. I teach chemistry, Matayom 5. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kesalin Kunala. I'm from Bangkok School, Trat. I'm teaching mathematics for primary school. I teach mathematics in English 2 years ago, but now I teach mathematics in Thai.
ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะหลายท่านเดินทางมาไกลมากนะคะต้องขอบคุณมากๆเลยที่ได้สละเวลามาร่วมการเสวนากับเราในวันนี้นะคะ Many of us have traveled very far to be with us today. So on behalf of IPST, I would like to deeply thank you for leaving your classes and spare us your time to give ideas and recommendations to IPST today. So today, So today we would start with 3 presentations, and we hope to get a general discussion going on after that. But I'm sure that during the speaker presentation or after each presentation, if you have questions or discussion, feel free to raise your issues and discuss your point. In the agenda, we said we'll end at 4:30, but actually for the general discussion, we would end a little bit early at 2:30, and we'd have a small group meeting for selected trainers in previous program afterwards. So you can tell your family that you'll be home early, actually earlier than we informed you. So we're gonna conclude our discussion at 2:30 today, except for the trainers of SAS curriculum pathways would be required to stay on afterwards for a wrap-up meeting. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our initiatives at IPST. We know that in Thailand there are many schools that actually started teaching science and mathematics in English for a while, at least 5 years that we know of. But we have just started the initiatives of supporting the teachers to teach science and mathematics in English, and we are doing this in many dimensions. We started by translating the textbooks and teacher guides into English. That's in process, and I think the first batch would come out to be used in school this coming semester. We also delivered some professional development training for using online science and mathematics resources in English, and that's what's SAS curriculum pathways that I mentioned earlier. So we implemented that in 200 schools throughout the country, and the teachers were using the materials in English, but they are not required to teach the class in English. So they'll be teaching in Thai language, but they'll be using the materials in English in this online curriculum resources. IPST is also developing some example lessons. We record example video of classes teaching in English to see the pedagogy and the teaching style, and we were very fortunate to have Professor Arthur Eisencraft to be one of our presenter in the example lessons, and we'll be doing some examples for mathematics as well. Next online in the plan is the professional development for the master teachers, and we are hoping that many of you present today will be interested in being IPST master teachers. That would be a significant help to us in our resource development and also in our future professional development. That's we are planning. Another activity is this kind of activity. We are planning to have 2 forums this year. So today is one of the 2. And we hope that from this kind of gathering, we could build a community of practice. We can have people who are interested in supporting teachers in using science and in teaching science and mathematics in English, and we can share our best practices. And if you look behind this way, there are some posters of the best practices for the teachers who who come and attend this forum today. So if you have time, maybe during coffee, you can look at the best practices, and maybe the teachers who presented these best practices could be around to discuss over the coffee as well. Another activity that we are doing is about the policy research. IPST is gathering information from research and also from the real practice in the schools to decide how to best support you as the teachers, what we can do to support the science and math teachers to teach in English, what kind of materials, what kind of lesson plans or other materials that would be useful, what kind of training, is it going to be face-to-face or online or both, what kind of materials and support and training program that we should deliver to you. So we are currently doing some policy research on that too. So with this several activities going on, maybe you can see that there are three things that we are focusing on right now. One is about the knowledge, both from research and real practice. And we are thinking about teacher preparation and also trying to develop appropriate resources to support the teachers. Okay, and as for our Train the Trainer workshop, we are looking at 4 separate groups of teachers to join in the Train the Trainer program. So we will be having a group for primary science, primary maths, secondary science, and secondary maths. I know that the secondary science group is very big because you have chemistry, biology, physics, and earth science. But we'll start with a big group initially, but maybe in the future we might separate that into each discipline. And for the teachers who are interested, on behalf of IPST, I ask you to commit the dates that's shown on the PowerPoint. So we're training 4 weekends, 8 days in total. And there will be a forum, exchange of information at the end. So if you're interested, you can express your interest. We have many people who are interested in science, secondary science, actually more than we could accept, but maybe we can think about how we can accommodate those who are interested. But we have very few numbers on primary, both science and mathematics. So if you have friends or you see many, some very able and capable teachers who teaches science and mathematics at primary level, please send us your recommendation. So those are the dates for the training, and we are looking at having the training here at Ambassador Hotel. So I would now start up our forum by having our first presenter, Dr. Yep Banha. May I introduce our speaker this morning, Dr. Yep Banha, holds a Master of Arts in Southeast Asian Studies. He has Master of Education and PhD in Mathematics Education. Dr. Yep is also is now the principal at the Marshall Cavendish Institute. Prior to that, he spent 10 years at the National Institute of Education Singapore, where he taught a range of teacher education courses and was involved in several funded research in mathematics education. Dr. Yep has conducted teacher professional development courses in 5 continents, presented several keynote lectures at international conferences, and written for academic publication. He has been invited to give seminars at various universities around the world and sits on the advisory board of several schools in Singapore and other parts of Asia. He also speaks Thai nearly fluently and has become a good friend of IPST throughout the years. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Yep Banha with a big round of applause.
Good morning. My name is Banha, and I'll be doing the opening presentation. Marshall Cavendish Institute is actually a teacher professional development institute based in Singapore. We work with teachers who are already in schools, whereas NIE focuses on pre-service training. What I'll be doing with you is to talk a little bit about our Singapore experience when we first started introducing English as a medium of instruction, and also based on my experience with working with schools around Asia and elsewhere when they begin to embark on using English as a medium of instruction. that's Singapore. It wasn't like that when I was born. That's when Singapore became an independent nation. Some of you may know that Singapore became a nation somewhat reluctantly. It got kicked out from Malaysia in 1965. I will start by sharing with you the major reforms in Singapore that led to the use of English as a medium of instruction. That happens in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we had a big recommendation, and one of them is to use English as a medium of instruction. If you were in Singapore in the late 70s, you would think that that was somewhat a crazy idea, because many of our teachers were not comfortable in using English, let alone to teach in English. Back then, we have different languages as a medium of instruction. Some schools do it in Malay, others use Chinese, and a small number use Tamil, one of the many Indian languages. And of course, there are English medium schools. But in 1980, the Ministry of Education decided that we should do this thing, to use English to teach in all subjects in primary and secondary school. At the same time, as far as mathematics instruction is concerned, there was a major shift in moving away from the so-called traditional approach in teaching mathematics. I'm really giving the word traditional a bad name. By traditional approach, I mean we used to focus on memorization, doing difficult calculation, carrying out procedure, and we pretended that that was doing mathematics. But in the early 80s, the Ministry of Education, based on the recommendation and research done internationally, decided that we should not continue doing that so-called traditional approach. And we begin to use this concrete, pictorial, abstract approach based on the work of Jerome Bruner to kind of change our mathematics instruction. So that happens around the same time. So in the 80s, these were the two big things. Mathematics and English are the main core subjects in our schools. It still continues to be so. These two subjects have slightly more instructional time than other school subjects in Singapore. So to have two big things happening around the same time was quite unsettling for many of our teachers. There they are having to change the way they teach mathematics, and at the same time, they need to use a somewhat foreign language at that point in time to teach mathematics, science, for that matter, everything else. In the early 90s, we have another shift in mathematics curriculum, and that is to make problem solving the focus of mathematics instruction. Around the same time, we also have the inquiry approach in science education. So this happens around the early 90s. So these were the big things that has happened in Singapore related to our discussion today. Science and mathematics education and the use of English as a medium of instruction. Throughout this presentation, please feel free to just raise questions or a point as I go along. Please do not feel that you are interrupting. I will now share with you a little bit of what is the language expectation of students in Singapore. In primary 1, that is grade 1, the first year of formal schooling, preschool in Singapore is not part of formal schooling. Most children today go to some kind of kindergarten, but it is not part of the education system, not part of the formal education system. Our formal education system begins in primary 1, grade 1, when the students are 6+, turning 7. Not very different from elsewhere in the world. The language expectation is that they may not be able to read English, but they might have some exposure to the language, either because they have gone to some kind of kindergarten or they have watched television on the national TV. There must be some form of exposure to English language. Can they speak and read the language? Not necessary. But today, because many of our parents are very affluent, they would have sent their children to some kinds of kindergarten, and they may be speaking English at home, but the majority of Singaporeans today, just about 50%, continue not to use English as a home language. So that's the expectation when the children come to us. They probably have heard some form of English. It's more likely Singlish than English. We have our local version of English in Singapore. We lovingly call them Singlish. So among ourselves, often we will lapse into that informal version of English. It's some kind of a pidgin English. But most of our children would have heard some English words here and there before they come to school. So that's a kind of expectation, and that's a page from our present-day Singapore textbooks. This is chapter 2. So soon after they enter school, in primary 1, the textbooks will look somewhat like that. The language is not too difficult, and the Ministry of Education take care to make sure the publishers are introducing age-appropriate language at that point. And the teacher is likely to be reading the instruction to the students. In any case, no teacher will be opening the textbook at this point in the lesson, where the lesson is more an activity. But this is the kind of expectation in primary 1. A lot of the mathematics and science instruction, by the way, we do not begin science instruction until primary 3, until grade 3. So grade 1 and grade 2, we do not do science in schools. Science instruction only begin in primary 3. And by then, they have fairly competent language skills already. So for mathematics, it begins in grade 1, primary 1, and a lot of teachers will probably begin a lesson in a concrete way, as recommended by the textbooks. So for example, in this lesson, they are using cubes, somewhat like Lego cubes, Unifix cubes, in this case 4 cubes, and they break the cubes in different ways, and then there is this repetitive language structure. How many are there in each group? 3 and 1 make 4. So this repetitive structure, something and something make 4, 2 and 2 make 4, 1 and 3 make 4, 3 and 1 make 4, 4 and 0 make 4, somewhat is used to help our students acquire the necessary language to communicate during the mathematics classes. By primary 4, students are found to be able to read simple word problems. So for example, our students in grade 4 or primary 4 are fairly capable of reading a word problem such as this. This is a test item from the Trends in Mathematics and Science Study teams. So about 80% of 4th graders in Singapore, they are able to get this right. I'm assuming that they are able to read this little passage. The other 20% who did not get it right, it could be a combination of either they cannot read it, or more likely, they can read it but cannot comprehend it, and then most likely, they can read and somewhat comprehend it, but did the mathematics wrong anyway. So I think this kind of gives us a confidence that by the time they are about 10 years old, they are capable of reading something to this point. A train left Redville at 8:45 a.m. It arrived in Bedford 2 hours and 18 minutes later. What time did it arrive in Bedford? So not a totally complex paragraph, but something that you would expect of a 10-year-old. Similarly, in a situation that's less familiar to them, in a soccer tournament, teams get either 3 points for a win, 1 point for a tie, 0 points for a loss. Zland has 11 points. What is the smallest number of games Zland could have played? So these are the items put out by the international body in assessing student achievement across more than 60 countries in grade 4 and grade 8. And these are just 2 items from the grade 4 test. And this kind of gives us some assurance that by primary 4, the students are capable of reading things like that. And by the end of primary schooling, by the end of grade 6, our students are expected to be able to handle language to a great extent. In particular, our state test national test called the Primary School Leaving Examination for the mathematics, it places a great emphasis on word problems. A lot of the items are word problems. Let me give you an example of such an item. This is taken from the most recent examination held at the end of 2012. A bakery and a library are 120 meters apart. They are located between Hong's house and Jaya's house, as shown below. The bakery is exactly halfway in between the two houses, and the diagram is given. One day, Hong and Jaya started cycling from their houses at the same time, and they arrived at the library together. Jaya cycled at 70 meters per minute, while Hong cycled at a speed of 15 meters per minute faster than Jaya. And then the questions follow. So our 6th graders, 11 plus 12-year-olds, they are expected to be able to handle language to a great extent. Not only are they expected to be able to do the mathematics related to it, in this case, rate and speed, they are also expected to be able to read, comprehend, manage the information which is somewhat complex, and then deal with the mathematics and computation related to it. I've just spent a couple of moments a while ago sharing with you the kind of language expectations in present-day Singapore education as far as the 1st graders, 4th graders, and 6th graders are concerned. Beyond that, our secondary students in grade 7, or what we call secondary 1, is not different from Matayom Neng. It's about the same, secondary 1, all through secondary 4, and then for those who continue to grades 11 and 12, the junior colleges, of course, they are expected to handle language appropriate to their age as benchmarked internationally. So our secondary students are expected to be able to handle language at the level that is expected of people who use language as their first language. I will not bother you with the mathematics, but for those of you who are teaching mathematics and interested in the solution, when you download the PowerPoint slides, you are able to see the solution to it. But for the purpose of this morning's discussion, it's probably not that important. I will now share with you a little bit about situations that we had in Singapore when we first started and elsewhere. The case for Singapore is a national case that I studied simply because I'm there all the time and working in it and doing research in it. As I mentioned to you, we started off in 1980 trying to do this thing to teach mathematics and science in English, at the same time to have a new approach in teaching mathematics. Some of the difficulties is to grapple with these two big changes. Teach mathematics in a fairly new way, and then teach mathematics in a language that is probably not our first language. And what are the things that we did at that point in time is to give our teachers a textbook that is fairly easy to manage. The language is not cluttered. It gave them some scaffolds in what they can say to the students. The repetitive structure that is embedded in a textbook to help the students learn those structures to articulate some of their thoughts. And in the pre-service teacher education, all the teachers are expected to attend a course that's called Use of English in Teaching, UET. Today, I think it has kind of evolved because most of our pre-service teachers are fairly competent in using English, so it has kind of shifted its focus to emphasize more on communication rather than just the mere use of English in teaching. But I recall when I was, that's a long time ago, when I was preparing to become a teacher, I had to attend a course that taught us how to pronounce words, how to make announcements in the morning, and such other functional use of the language. Later, I'm going to share with you some factors that kind of helped us in Singapore when we first embarked on this journey. But the case for Singapore is a national one where we implemented this whole thing across the 170 primary schools in the nation. In the Philippines, where I also do a fair bit of work, there are actually two different systems. That's actually me being the teacher to a group of students. I sometimes do lessons in the Philippines for the teachers to study. We call this lesson study. In the Philippines, there are actually two different systems. The private school system, which is just like the Singapore system, where English language is used on a daily basis. It is the medium of instruction, it is the language of work, everything in school functions in English. And then there is the public school system, where English is used a lot, but there are also hundreds of local languages and dialects that are being used in different parts of the country. So if you are in Metro Manila private school, then it's a bit like the case of Singapore, where everything functions in English. English is not the student's first language or the teacher's first language, but basically everything happens in the English language. If you are in Metro Manila and it's a public school, then the students are exposed to a lot of English. They may not speak English at home, but everything else happens in English as well. The proficiency of the teachers in the public schools is a little bit less than that in a private school, but once you go outside Metro Manila and you go to the provinces, that's when most people do not speak English at all. They would have spoken one of their local languages or dialects, and at the same time they have to learn the national language called Filipino language, which is actually Tagalog. And then on top of that, they now have to learn English and have to learn to use English in the learning of mathematics and science. So the case of Philippines kind of help us understand how to help the teachers in the provinces in making sure the students are exposed to English more on a daily basis. And one of the learning points for us is that if the schools operate mostly in English, then even if the children do not normally speak English outside the classroom, then their ability in the language will be better. The case of Malaysia, the country that kicked Singapore out in 1965, they shifted to use English in mathematics and science some time ago. But in more recent years, for, I suspect, political reasons and nationalistic reasons, they have kind of revert back to what they started off more than a decade ago. So the case of Singapore is when a previous government felt that they need to do this to make their graduates competitive in the global economy, and in the more recent years, they revert back to using the national language, which is Bahasa Malaysia, Malay language, to teach mathematics and English. The case of Malaysia kind of give us caution about not to introduce too much politics into education. Otherwise, the outcomes of the students is in the hands of a bunch of politicians rather than educators. Incidentally, I am a Malaysian, just that I studied in Singapore all my life because my parents didn't have confidence in me using Malay to study mathematics and science when I was a child. Brunei is similar to Singapore, except that around the country, the use of English is somewhat less than in Singapore. Brunei is a case that kind of gives us insights into teaching mathematics and science in the local language, in this case, the Malay language, Bahasa Melayu, in the early grades. So perhaps the first 3 years using local language, and then afterwards begin to inject the use of English, and by the time they are in secondary school, they will use English to study mathematics and science. So if we are interested to look at how that will impact on the students' learning, then Brunei have some learning points for us. I will now share with you smaller cases of schools that I know. So the previous cases are the ones that I kind of study as a system, the kind of things that happen within the system that impact on students' learning. And then I also study smaller cases of schools and school districts in the region. The case of Indonesia. We found that in the case of Indonesia, most people will not speak English. However, if the school run an English program and all the teachers speak English all the time with the children, and that the children will be able to handle the language quite well. So this is a particular case of Bina Bangsa School. The school is run by local people, and then they get help from some Singaporean teachers as well as a lot of Filipino teachers. And they have decided from day one that they are going to use English in the daily operation as well as, of course, the medium of instruction. And the children there speak English perfectly fine. Although the moment they step out of school, they will no longer use English at all. So it seems like it is adequate if the school environment is English speaking, even if they do not use English at all at home and in public spaces. It seems like it's good enough that the children can discuss and can articulate their thoughts in English, and quite rarely do they revert to Bahasa Indonesia, which is the common language for the students. Indonesia is quite an unusual situation because no matter what racial group you are very fluent in the national language. So even the Chinese students, they may not be fluent in the Chinese language, but they can speak Bahasa Indonesia very well. It's almost like their mother tongue at the present time. And similarly, I work with a few schools in Thailand, and these are some schools that run English programs and all that. And I think you probably know this situation better than I do because you are here. And schools such as Anglo-Singapore International School, they have quite a lot of local students, Thai students. And the data that was collected by the school indicated that most of the Thai students rarely speak English at home, but that did not seem to affect their performance in school at all, in particular the use of English language. It is quite interesting that their debate team comprises of a few local students. But it seems to be important that these children begin to use English right from the start, the moment they enter kindergarten or primary one. They found that students who come in halfway through, like those who join the school in the upper primary grades, primary 5 onwards, they seem to be the ones struggling, having used Thai for a long time. And even though they are really brilliant students, they are very capable students, it seems that it impacted on their subsequent learning when they switched to the use of English to learn everything else. And now just a couple of examples from elsewhere. I work with some schools in England, and these are schools where the children are recent immigrants. They are children of recent immigrants. So most of them do not speak English at home, and many of them are learning to speak the language. And it seems again that because in England everything operates in English and the learning is in English, it seems like by the time the students finish primary school, they are fairly competent in the language, and despite their home background, they did not perform as well as students from more affluent background, but their performance is fairly competent in mathematics and science. So these are a bunch of schools under this academy. These are schools that used to be failing schools, and when they become some academy or the other, there's a new administration that comes in, and in this case, they kind of try to look at ways to help children who do not normally speak English at home to kind of cope in a situation where everything is in English. Chile, they use Spanish everywhere. So if you cannot speak Spanish, you kind of feel a bit lost when you're in Chile. And very often we go there because we work with the schools in the public schools in mathematics teaching. Chile is trying to do what we embarked upon in 1980, which is to use the fairly new approach in teaching mathematics. Of course, most of the time they use Spanish, but we also saw that there are a few schools that use English as a medium of instruction. And again, the same message we got from these case studies, and that is, even though the environment outside school is Spanish speaking, even though at home they speak mostly Spanish, and if it's not Spanish, it's not English. If the school provide an English-speaking environment, it seems like it did not impact on the students' ability to use the language in learning mathematics and science, or for that matter, other subjects. So there are a handful of schools in Chile that use English as a medium of instruction. Their teachers are all Chileans, but they use English on a daily basis with the children. I've also done some research in the Netherlands, and again, in Netherlands, everything is Dutch. People speak Dutch outside school, and although most Dutch people, they can speak English very well, you will not hear English on a daily basis. And we saw two things. We saw that in some instances, especially in the rural areas, although the children are not totally comfortable using the language, they can understand it well enough. So we have seen many examples where the teacher instruct in English and the children responded in Dutch. And they go on like that perfectly well. The more able students, or students in the urban areas, so the school on the left is in Utrecht. Utrecht is fairly international. So even though this is just a regular public school and the students are average students, they can operate in English perfectly well. The photograph on the right is in a rural area where most students are not comfortable using English, but for the children in the so-called gifted classes, meaning these are the more able students, they can operate not just in English, but in several other European languages. I'm going to go on to some things that we learned from our experience in using English in the learning of mathematics and science. But before that, I would like to pause a little while for a bit of discussion and questions. Some of you recognize this because it's in Thailand, right? Well, we also do some work with public schools in the rural parts of Buriram, in Lampai Mat. But before that, questions or points of discussion? How many hours of English language instruction?
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Does it vary from early education to secondary school, or is it the same throughout?
As far as instruction in English language is concerned, it is 1 hour a day, and the younger students get slightly more. The older students in secondary school get 4 hours a week. So it's about the same. So 5 hours a week, 4 hours a week. But everything else is in English. They study social studies in English, science in English, everything is in English. Public announcements, everything is in English, except when they have their home language lessons.
Is there any bilingual lessons?
No, there's no bilingual lesson at all. So it's either in English or it's in the home language. So, for example, I'm Chinese, and then there are some Chinese students, or I can understand Malay, and I will not be speaking Chinese to a Chinese student, even outside class, during recess time. So, two Chinese people speaking English to each other. Among children, sometimes they'll chatter in their home languages. So sometimes I hear like a group of Malay boys talking among themselves, and they're like talking with me, but when I respond, it's still in English. So that's how we operate.
Sorry, one more. Do students who struggle in the language get other support systems throughout the school?
Yes. Students who struggle with the language get support, especially at the starting point. At the starting point in primary one, the gap between those who can and those who cannot is so wide. Today, the problem is very small. Probably 5 to 10% of a group of 400 children that come into a school in primary one will have close to nothing as far as English language is concerned. So these children will just be lost totally in a classroom. They will not even understand basic instruction given by the teacher, or not very well at all, right? So when they enter school in primary one, the children are tested. We have this thing that's called school readiness test, and they are put into 4 levels. Level 4 means they are just not ready, and usually we have 5 to 10% of children in that. And these children, they are pulled out during English language and mathematics. They remain in class for all other subjects like art or music or social studies or health education, but during English language and mathematics, they leave the classroom and they study with a teacher in a small group situation. So 10 children per group. Our regular class size is 30 for primary one, but these children get more attention. So that's the kind of support that they get, and this is implemented across all schools. Beyond primary one, it is up to the school to handle instances where students continue to struggle. Usually, you do not find a primary 2 student who do not understand English in a Singapore system, but you might in primary one. So they have some support in primary one, but beyond primary 2, there is nothing special. But many schools conduct what we call remedial classes anyway, but that's really up to the school and up to the individual teachers. So nothing that is at the national level, but more like at the local school and classroom level. Immigrant students.
Sorry, immigrant students at a higher level would get that same
That's
support.
Right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Something else? Either a point or a question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Randy. You mentioned using a different approach when teaching math. I think you called it concrete, practical, abstract, and you, I think, used inquiry in association with that. Is that also used in teaching science?
So for science, we use this inquiry-based approach. Yes. So the answer is yes. In mathematics, we call that problem-solving approach, the concrete, pictorial, abstract approach. In fact, the whole education system focuses on the same thing, which is thinking and problem-solving. So the simple answer is yes. For science, I think it is called the inquiry-based approach, and in mathematics, it's called problem-solving approach. But fundamentally, they are the same thing.
And did you make the change to using English and this new approach because you thought they were compatible, they would support each other, or was there another reason for it?
The reason for that is not so much that they are compatible with each other, but those were the 2 decisions made for economic reasons, because we feel that our students need to be competent in the language, English language, and at the same time, they must learn mathematics in a way that the average learners can perform at a high level. So they were not selected because they were compatible with each other, but they were selected because our students kind of need them, and they were implemented at the same time because those were the results of a big reform called the Go King Sui's reform. It was led by one of our senior ministers back then. So those were some of the key recommendations, to use English and to change the way we teach mathematics.
Can I have one? Yep.
Yes, sure.
What is the first, when you implement all the stuff in, I think, in 1980, right? What is the major problem you guys got during that time?
I think the major problem is nobody knew what was happening.
Right.
That was a major problem. Just like probably all ministries of education around the world, while they may be excellent in planning and researching, they are less competent in transmitting the message across. So the difficulty was mostly in getting the message across to, and we don't have a big system. Ours is just 170 schools. And even then it took us a while. I think something between 3 to 5 years to begin to see any semblance of order. Right. So we do not get any good results in the first 5 years of implementation, but fortunately for us, our government they are kind of stubborn, so they said, it didn't go on well, it's probably because of us not doing it well, but nothing wrong with the approach and the focus.
But yeah, anyway, you get a good result to improve the next round of the curriculum?
Yes, I think each time we implement it, we go down to the schools and find out what are the issues and all that. So yes, I think the researchers and the Ministry of Education people going down to schools to see what's happening kind of help us get more information to improve it. I think one of the things that happened in the earlier cycles is not so much in the use of English. That was fairly straightforward. The problem was that our teachers were just not that competent in the English language. So that takes a while to kind of, the newer teachers are more competent than the older teachers. So the older teachers, they were just coping. In fact, some of them cannot cope and they switch from teaching chemistry to teaching Chinese language because they just cannot function in the English language. So that wasn't much we can do. So as far as the language part is concerned, it was quite straightforward. It was more the mathematics part. This idea of teaching in a new way, not focusing on memorization, took a while to sink in among our teachers. And the professional development seems to be critical. Afterwards, I'll share with you the 3 critical success factors.
Thanks.
Is there anything else before I move on to the last part, which is to glean some lessons that we got from all these cases I mentioned, and then I'll conclude by sharing with you the 3 critical factors that we kind of saw in all these implementation cases. Anything else? The first thing that we learn, and we learn quite well because it's quite obvious, is that as long as students are immersed in an English language environment, that seems to be already good enough for them to be able to use English in mathematics and science, even if the society at large is not using English language. In present day Singapore, English language is quite common outside school, in public media. But in a lot of places like Indonesia and Chile, that's not the case. But it did not seem to affect the students too much as far as using English in learning mathematics and science. So as long as the school provides an English-speaking environment, the language of work, the language of instruction is all in English. The teachers speak with the children in English. The students are encouraged to speak to each other in English. That seems to be quite sufficient. It also seems like the use in English in mathematics and science allow the students to become competent in the language itself. So it has a feedback effect. The very fact that you study English and then you use it in mathematics and then you use it in science, where you try to describe what you do in science and to explain what you see in the experiments and to try to articulate your thoughts in the abstract ideas in fractions, that seems to make the students more competent in the language itself. So this kind of also gives us advice as to how we can run our English language program. The mere teaching of the language to Singapore students or Indonesian students or recent immigrants to England is kind of consolidated by the fact that they are using it on a daily basis to describe situations, but also to articulate more difficult ideas in mathematics and science. A lot of ideas in mathematics and science are fairly abstract, and their struggle in the use of English to capture those abstract ideas seems to help them in improving their language. And this is kind of reflected in the international study teams. For example, Singapore students generally do fairly well in such studies in mathematics and science. At the same time, they perform quite well also in the reading test. PEARLS is a corresponding study. TIMS is for mathematics and science, and PEARLS is for reading. Reading means in any language, but of course in Singapore we take the test in English. So even though Singapore students at grade 4 level, when they took the test, they are taking it in English, it didn't seem to impact their performance, and they are doing just as well as students who are reading in their local language. So it kind of reaffirmed what we thought would happen. If we stuck to teaching English language and then teach mathematics and science in local languages, we thought back then that the learning of English will not be effective. They just learn the language. They may not be able to use it well. Maybe they can write well, maybe they can read well, but they will not be able to use it well. So we were worried about that. And that was one of the impetus in making the change. It's kind of like make us go and make the change in 1980s that our students are learning English as a school subject. They are not living it, they are not living it, they are not using it in their daily lives. So we thought, okay, if they use it more every day, at least, if not at home, back then, most people do not speak English, at least during class time, the more they use it, the better they become. And years later, this is confirmed by international benchmarking studies, where our Singapore students are fairly highly ranked as far as their reading competency is concerned. Something else that helped us understand the use of language in acquiring abstract ideas. We found the use of concrete representation and pictorial representation help students consolidate the learning of abstract ideas. So it's not just a language. Because they are learning mathematics and science ideas in a concrete fashion and later in a more visual fashion, even if you lack the language competency, it does not put you at a disadvantage. Had the instruction been more teacher-centered, reliant more on teacher explanation, then perhaps a student who is less competent in the English language may be having great disadvantages. But the very fact that they are using concrete materials to learn as a primary way to construct the ideas, supported by pictorial representation, the so-called CPA approach, kind of alleviate problems related to students who come in with very little English language background. So we found that the use of concrete materials in learning science and in particular mathematics really help in cases where the students are not totally competent in the language. This is an example. This is a very extreme example because these are Chilean students who speak no English and I was their teacher and I speak no Spanish. And I was all by myself, no translator. And these are these are third graders. They speak no English, I speak no Spanish. We got along fine. Simply because the lesson was based on concrete materials. When they cannot understand what I'm trying to tell them, they watch what I do, and then they do it. And based on what they do, they acquire, in that day's lesson, the idea of multiplication. That day, they were learning how to get 3 multiplied by 6 from 2 multiplied by 6, and also how they can get 4 multiplied by 6 from 2 multiplied by 6, doubling. And then from then on, they figure out the rest of the multiplication facts for 6 just by knowing the few things that were given to them. It was dominated by student conversation among themselves. So it wasn't a teacher-centered type of lesson. And as a result, the fact that they lacked the language, in this case English language, did not seem to impact on their ability to construct the necessary knowledge that was the goal of the lesson. Singapore mathematics curriculum is dominated by the use of pictorial representation, following the use of concrete manipulative. This is a school in New York that used the same approach. They use Singapore textbooks. And these are older students learning how to multiply 3/4 by 2/3. And you see the absence of words in the instruction itself. It's mostly pictorial. And sure, in this case, this is New York, so they speak English and everything is in English. But even if you just not listen to the language, to the conversation, you can still make quite a lot of sense of what is happening. So the Jerome Bruner's idea of using concrete representation and visual representation to initiate and support learning is found to be an important component when we first begin to move to using English language to help our learners. At that point, some students do not have the language ability, but they were not disadvantaged because we use the concrete and pictorial approach. This is the question is this a Singapore model? The American call it Singapore math, but there's nothing Singaporean in it because it's the work of Jerome Bruner. So yes, this is actually, they are actually using Singapore textbooks in this school district. They call it Singapore math, but there's nothing Singaporean about it. But yes, this is a Singapore style instruction in mathematics. The use of the model, yeah? Right? Yes.
I'm curious to know how much of what you're saying right now applies in the secondary educational setting.
Right. When they move on to secondary school, we expected them to have the competency of a learner, a competency that is kind of a first language learner, right? How much of this apply at the secondary level? I think this example kind of answer part of the question. For example, this is not yet secondary, but this is like grade 5, grade 6, when they do an algebraic problem like this. So these are 5th graders in New York, again using Singapore textbooks, solving a Singapore word problems from the Singapore textbook. And what they do, as you can see, is they use pieces of paper to model the quantities. So they were trying to model and figure out a situation where box B contained twice as many books as box A, and box C contains 20 more books than box A, and together the 3 boxes contains 116 books. And this pedagogy of using concrete materials, all that, continue to be emphasized in secondary school, except that a lot of times it may no longer be necessary if the students have learnt it well in the elementary grades. So most secondary schools in Singapore hardly ever have to use concrete materials in all the lessons. But when they do a new lesson, most teachers will still be encouraged to use some concrete introduction. So this CPA approach is actually not age dependent. Jerome Bruner says when students learn a new idea, they must encounter concrete representation. So I suppose for calculus, they will still begin in a concrete way. But let's say for fractions, I suppose they will not, because the students are no longer new to fractions. But the use of pictorial representation help our secondary students who continue to struggle with the language. Because in this case, the students try to show, okay, if this is the number of books in box A, then box B is twice as many. So this is how it looked like. So when they lack the language, the visual kind of compensate for their inability to grasp the ideas through the language medium, but instead now use the visual medium to make sense of pretty much the same thing. And our secondary teacher will then use this as a bridge to link to the algebraic equation that they will write. So from there, the teacher said, okay, instead of drawing something like that to represent the unknown, we could use a letter, for example, X, to represent that quantity. And if this is X, then the number of books in box B, you can see that. And the number of books in box C, you can see it is X plus 20. Could you now construct an equation? And they will then proceed to that. And from there, they can learn why is it that the next step will be 4x equals to 116, take away 20. Because visually you can see, if you take out the 20, you will then be left with 4x. So the abstraction makes sense to them. So the teachers continue to be asked to use a CPA approach when they introduce a new concept. But many secondary school teachers no longer use it because the ideas that the students are learning, they are not new anymore. But when it's new, many teachers are encouraged to continue to do a concrete introduction. Another thing that we learned in our initial years of introducing English is our textbooks. We try to give our teachers a textbook that is clear, where the language structure is clear. Like in this case, this is a first grade textbook
we can make 10 to add. No unnecessary language. So here they are learning ways to add. And the method here is to make 10. Where 8 plus 5, you can make 10 by moving 2 over to 8 or moving 5 over to 5, whichever it is, but the idea of making 10. So the textbook's presentation is not cluttered with clear language structures. Our Ministry of Education continue to be very fussy about this point even today. They always ask the textbook publishers, is it necessary to put in this phrase? Why can't you simplify the language? So they want a textbook presentation that is not cluttered with clear presentation to make sure the teachers know what is the language structure that is the focus of that lesson. In this lesson is make 10. Something and something, make 10. How do you make 10? I will move 2 buns over to make 10. So the language structure become pretty obvious. In fact, this is a textbook in 3rd grade when we first introduced the 2 reforms in the early 80s. You notice the absence of language on the page. Students learn that 6 times 6 is 6 times 5, add 6. If you want to know 6 rows of 6 and you know 5 rows of 6, you merely have to add another row. The rest of the page look like this. If you need to know 6 multiplied 7 times, and you already know 6 multiplied 5 times, and 6 multiplied twice, if you know 5 rows and 2 rows, you can figure out 7 rows. Can you see the explanation is done without any language at all? At least language in the conventional sense of the word. And the same thing happens for the rest of the page. So this careful presentation of concepts in the textbooks was quite critical in the initial years of implementing the learning of English, the learning of mathematics and science using English. These are just other examples of our textbooks in the early introduction of this particular initiative. Something else that we learned is that getting students to keep a notebook to articulate, or at least to learn to articulate their ideas, is important. Today, the use of math journal continue to be a critical component of Singapore mathematics classroom. This is not a Singaporean school, but it's a school in the Philippines adopting some of the ideas we use in Singapore. And all their students have a math journal. On a daily basis, they struggle to put down some ideas. Of course, the teacher will give them some instruction. Sometimes it could be as simple as write down 2 things you learned today. Write down 1 thing that made you feel excited today. Sometimes they have to write a note to a friend who is absent today, what we learned today. Sometimes they have to explain how they solve a problem. So the scaffolds are given by the teacher on a daily basis, the last 5 minutes of every lesson. We found that students keeping a math journal helps learners who do not often use the language outside the classroom to be more competent, not just in mathematics and science, but also in the language itself. This is an example of American children doing Singapore textbooks. So Singapore textbooks always have this demand for them to write something in the English language. For example, the 2nd graders were doing 5 times 7 and 7 times 5, and at the end of it, they are asked, what is the difference between the 2 multiplication sentences?